Good afternoon, viewers. We are back in the PU webinar series. Today, we have amongst us some of these top-notch speakers from the industry who will be sharing their experience on brand equity. Now, one of the important and very vital factors within the corporates or any business, irrespective of its nature and size, is how well you are connected with your stakeholders, how you can use and improve your goodwill with them, and how you can involve them in the daily progress or daily operations of the business. This definitely has positive results. One, you instant get a feedback as to what the community or the society or other stakeholders are thinking about. Where is the gap? And that credibility gap, therefore, reduces. So, in today's panel discussion, the topic brand equity, raising the bar with and through stakeholder communication, we are looking at answering those points which generally the students, the professionals who are going to join us on this webinar have. What does it take? How much efforts does a corporate put in? And how much do we involve the stakeholders? Because if they get into everyday's need, there can be different connotations to it. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Professor Dr. Ananya Mehta, the Dean Faculty of Arts at Parul University. I welcome you all on this webinar. I also have the pleasure of welcoming the esteemed panel today who are going to share their views. And although they come from a very diversified field with tons of experience behind them, I take this opportunity to welcome them all and start this webinar with a very short introduction of each one of them. So to start off, today we will have Ms. Runa Maitra, who is the founder director of People's Talent International, and she will also be one of the key speakers and the moderator for the session. Along with us, we also have Mr. Kshitish Kashyap, who is the Vice President, Human Resources at the Optum Technology. Also, we have with us Mr. Arup Ganguly, the Strategic Business Head at Tech Go, and we also have with us Mr. Vikas Dua, the Chief HR Mentor at Chayan. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this webinar. Thank you so much for being with us, and the students are looking forward to this webinar. There has already been a buzz, and without taking much of the time, I would hand it over to Runa Madam for her opening remark and would request her for the further moderation. Madam, over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Ananya Mehta. It's a great opportunity to meet everyone from Parul University, and I would like to thank the entire management and faculties and students of Parul University. Very good evening to all of you. And we are definitely very much delighted that a very contemporary topic has been selected by Sir, and also I'm sure a great team is working with Professor Mehta. And we, when we look at brand equity, raising the bar with and through stakeholder communication, first thing comes to our mind: how do we create brand ambassadors in the organization? Because that question comes in my mind, because 2 decades I've spent in HR, and for almost 1 decade I'm in business. So first thing first, some question arises in our mind about branding. It can be employer branding, it can be organization branding as such, and we all understand the value of brand. For me, most important part is also personal branding, because our students would love to know that how they'll create, especially in this pandemic era, when things are pretty much challenging and they are considering, how do I reach to this great organization? I grew up dreaming about them. Of course, they're brand attracted. I think when we grew up, we had loads of companies in our mind. I remember my childhood, and I used to look up to people, and I actually dreamt and joined one of the company Scots. When I was a kid, I used to think that Aisha Escorts I would love to join, and when I actually joined there, that was my delight. But I think today's generation wanted to join. If I look back 15 years ago, organizations like Infosys, Accenture, because that's what I heard. But I think Kshitij and Vikas all did great branding of their organization, and Arup belongs to Honeywell, and a lot of good companies. You and actually you three are from a great organizations. But we also recognize that today, if you look at our students, they talk about Microsoft, Google's all the time. But I think what we need to deliberate today, it is not important only to look up to few brands. I think most important is that how do we create brand for ourselves? And many times the shift in mind has to happen, that am I going to be employee in corporate world, or should I look at myself to be an employer? And we do have startup expertise in this group itself, so that we can also look at certain aspects of stakeholder management, communication in terms of my communication, business communication, now digital communication. And in fact, we had been very enlightened. Yesterday's webinar, we talked about how do we also create the etiquette and hygiene of digital space. I think those kind of communication, and then looking into stakeholder management in terms of who are the stakeholders, maybe the promoters, maybe the board members, maybe the top management. In fact, our focus goes to our customers all the time. At the same time, people managers who are here from both business side and HR side, you talk about employees as your stakeholders. And if you look at the academia, our students are also a stakeholder, the main stakeholder, because they are not only going to study now, they're actually going to represent the institution in the corporate world, and they will bring value to their successors. I think that is exactly where probably we have been historically creating a model called employer value proposition. In fact, we have interchangeably used employee value proposition, employer value proposition. For that, we have designed a lot of internal communication and external communication. Gone are those days when we actually depended on advertisement companies, PR companies. They still create value, loads of them. But I think you and I became the actual baton holder, being the brand ambassadors. We came forward and said, hey, we would work towards a mechanism how we actually attract and retain employees. How do we create a culture where we are ensuring the right management engagement and stakeholder enlightenment are happening, so that my customers are happy? I think loads of such activities we have seen. And a most important part is that because of the pandemic, we are seeing enormous change. So are we getting ready for current stakeholder management? Who are they? Where are they? How are they behaving? What are the behavioral change I need to change? I need to look into. So I think a lot of such perspective will come during today's discussion. And I'm not at all stealing the thunder of our great speakers. We have great wisdom, which they have brought in. But surely for the questions I would envisage students are asking these days, that what should be our intervention? How do we prepare ourselves? I think there would be loads and loads of questions in their mind, but I would rather request our experts to first bring in their expertise, their experience, their wisdom to the table, and then maybe after each one of you speak, then we will go to our the stakeholder, the customers, the clients, to the students. So with that, I would like to look into the umbrella of our topic, and somewhere I felt let's bring in the first speaker from the business side. We can probably listen to the business demands, not only from our speaker as the business head, and also from how they manage stakeholders in various dimensions. So with that, I would request Arup to be our first speaker today and share thoughts and give us some enlightenment. Thank you so much. Over to you, Arup.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening to all. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Parul University, and all the key members there. So today's topic, very interesting, brand equity, raising the bar with and through stakeholder communication. Very interesting topic. A lot of questions there, a lot of statements there, a lot of definitions there. What is brand? What is brand equity? What about the stakeholders? What is communication? How does communication come in there? So before all of that, as I said, my name is Arup Ganguly. I have about 35 years of experience. Till a few months back, I was working with Honeywell as Director Project Development. I worked as Director Business Development for KBR and VP Business Development for Lloyd. So major part of my career has been in leadership roles in the business development side and project development side. And I'm essentially a mechanical engineer with an MBA. So that's my background. And what am I doing here? I'm communicating. I'm trying to create a brand of myself. I'm trying to define myself in your ears, right? And that's what the communication about a brand is all about. So, basics first. What is brand? The brand is nothing but it could be a name, it could be a logo, it could be a trademark, so which identifies and differentiates any product or service at the end of the day. And what about brand equity? Brand equity is any value that a consumer is willing to pay above and all, in contrast with a generic product or service vis-a-vis the brand that you're trying to create, and the brand image that you're trying to create. So it essentially means that any marketing effects that uniquely attribute towards the different outcomes due to the brand and whatever communication you are doing with the brand, right? Now, the bottom of everything is the brand knowledge. Foundation of creating that brand equity is the brand knowledge. And what does it comprise of? It comprises of brand awareness and the brand image. And where does the role of communication come in here? The role of communication come in for establishing the brand in the memory and linking strong and favorable unique associations around the brand. So that's where the communication part comes in, right? So there's a famous Keller's brand equity model, where there's a pyramid where it talks about 4 stages in a brand equity. First, the identity. Who are you? Basically, brand identity is basically the salience part of it. Who are you? Then comes the meaning part of it. What are you? So there comes the image and the performance part of it. One side is the performance, where the actual quality of the brand comes in, whether it's a service, whether it's a product, how does it work, whether it has a lasting effect in the minds of the consumers. And the other part is the image part of it in terms of how it has been communicated. So there is advertising and advertisement and all different types of communication, which I'm going to come to, they are talked about. Then the third stage is judgment and feeling, where the response part of it. So what about you? It's what are you is defined. Once it is defined, then what about you? What kind of feeling you leave in the taste, in the mind of the consumer, the stakeholders? We were talking about stakeholders. And finally, what about you and me? The relationship, the response, finally, that's the top of the pyramid. So that is the critical part. You have created a brand image, a brand equity for stakeholders, and there has to be a relationship between them. So what about that? What about, that relationship and the resonance part of it between the two? There are 2 sides to it, that product or the service and the brand associated with that, and the consumer or the stakeholders on the other side. So what is the resonance between the two? So that is what the top of the pyramid is. That's what you want to achieve. Now, having said, a little bit about what brand and brand equity is all about, for a successful communication, there are 2 steps. First, the consumer must encode the brand information and store it correctly in the memory. So there is some brand information that you have to disseminate and propagate or whatever. There are multiple ways for that. I will come to some details around that shortly. But then customer has to encode it and keep it correctly in their memory. And what is the second step? That he retrieves it, the recall value. He retrieves it at the correct time when such product or service related decision he's taking. The timing is very important. When suppose somebody is talking, has a brand, encoding about, let's say we talk about, some detergent. So you see there is a brand image around that detergent, and that there's an encoding part of it based on various factors in the mind. And then when the time comes for you're taking the decision around buying some detergent, that brand should pop up in your mind. That's the retrieval part of it. So that should happen around same time. So, and this communication, there are multiple ways to, think about or strategize about that communication part of it. There is something called borrowed interest tactics, where you use the presence of, cute babies or frisky puppies, pop music, celebrities, all kinds of methods. Fear-inducing threats. You would have seen that Onida, old ad that comes to my mind. So, suddenly something bizarre, and what it creates an impression, a lasting impression. So all those kind of things one can do. But then at the end of the day, there has to be a name associated with that, whatever information or communication that you're trying to disseminate. And there has to be a recall value, as I say. Now, very often what happens, for similar kind of products, different competing organizations are using similar kind of brand imaging, and there could be a competitive clutter. So you have to come out of that clutter, because it should be a very distinct and differentiated image that should be formed in the mind of the consumer, the stakeholder. So for that, what you make use of is you make use of some ad retrieval, cues. So you remember Lalita ji and that Surf Excel and ye jhank wala hai, those kind of things. So there is some buzzword which keeps popping in your mind the moment you think about that. So those are like ad retrieval cues. They're key visual. There could be catchy slogans or any unique advertising element that serves for effective reminder and remedy the problem of this clutter. This competitive clutter that it offsets that detrimental effects of competitive advertising. Now, having said that, of course, television is a very potent medium that has been used for many years, and very powerful medium. But is there an integrated way of communicating? Yes. I mean, very often what various organizations they resort to is that one side there could be the television medium, the radio, the print medium, the magazines, the newspaper, and all of them can work in synchronicity with each other. You can cue in what you're showing in the TV explicitly linked to a radio or a print ad. So basically what you can do, pick up some salient aspects of whatever you're displaying in the television communication, and you can use that in the print ad so that one can correlate and forms a more stronger image of the entire brand. So these are multiple ways, and sometimes what happens, there is a timing part of it in the television. For instance, if you, instead of 60-second or typical 30 seconds ad, you can go for a shorter duration, 15 seconds. And you can change actually the ad executions every time, because sometimes what happens is, it all depends on what are you trying to message. So it could be that you want to message the same thing over and over again and again. It could be that there are multiple things that you want to associate with that brand. So what do? You have multiple ad executions, and then finally you can have an umbrella ad which comprises of all those small multiple ads, which are like 15-second ads or something like that. So there are many methodologies which can be employed for this communication with the stakeholders. And the key part is that it has to keep the interest always alive in the minds of the stakeholders. And sometimes it is very necessary that you register that whether this interest is still alive or it is going down. Because overexposure to one ad could also lead to some kind of boredom or sometimes irritation also. So you would have seen many times, some products, they resort to changing of the ad actually. without diluting the basic framework of the image, the imagery that they have created. So they will use some salient image from the previous ad, and they will change the structure, the complete shape of the ad in a successive time, so that they come out of that boredom or the state of irritability. So these are few thoughts that I had in terms of the communication part of it, how you can employ your capabilities around communication to implant these ideas around a product or service. And there have been various studies like what kind of communication. So whether you want the conventional, the traditional communication, or social media. I mean, these days, of course, times have changed, and more the communication is based out of social media, right? Facebook or Twitter or various other methodologies are being used, and that could be firm created as well as user created, user generated, right? I mean, users are indulging into chats around some. Very often, it is seen that users are getting into chats around some brand and they're discussing. So there is a detrimental effect around that in terms of one is the brand awareness part of it, which is created usually by the traditional methodologies more than the user or the this social media based communication. But then what the social media based communication does is that it helps the brand in terms of becoming becoming a better brand image. And so that's how it helps in a longer run. So I thought these are a few things that I would share. Yes, in my experience with my erstwhile companies also, we have employed in depending on the product. Because again, the aspect is that within the umbrella of, let's say, an organization like Honeywell, which I used to work with, there are multiple different organizations, right? I mean, smaller organizations which have completely different set of products. So depending on the product, what kind of communication will work, that is vastly different for one from the other. So one is the umbrella brand image of Honeywell. And for that, Honeywell would do something, let's say, go out for CSR activities or whatever, I mean, and define themselves as one of the Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies in the US. And, with that, all that statement and imaging that comes around that, the overall bucket, the umbrella image or the brand will be created. Now, under that, different, Honeywell products would have their different, dynamics in terms of how they are sold, how the consumers, whether they are catering to what kind of customers. So then there are different strategies around that. So with that, I think I would have covered my quota of time. So thank you very much. I will hand it over to you, Runa, again, and you can take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Aru. I think it was very enriching because we, as expected, from your wisdom, from your experience being a business leader, the overall perspective around product communication and what importance of communication to the stakeholder from various models, and with your experience, you also try to reach out to students level in terms of ensuring that they understand the basic parameters, and you define the whole methodology about who aspect of the product and how they can communicate and how it can be favorably recalled. I think it was very, very valuable perspective from the business standpoint. So we will thank you for sharing the wisdom, and we are absolutely going to move the needle towards the people side now. And I would request Kshitij to bring in, being a global leader and also had a great career from India to globe, because now Kshitij is leading multiple countries in his new role. And we want to congratulate you again, although by now you must have had basket of congratulations with you. And you had accomplished so much in the industry. You have set up offices and hired people in multiple countries. You have been in Philippines, you had been in US. India, of course, is the base, but I think you have traveled worldwide to create the right kind of talent fit. And I think I would like to learn more from you today, because whatever I've learned from the past, I think there are loads of things you have today to share with us. So over to you, Kshitij. I'm waiting to learn from you.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Arup, for your thoughts, and then thank you, Runa, thank you, Dr. Ananya, and Parul University. It's always a pleasure to kind of really speak to the students, and I was just thinking, to be very frank with you, what I'm going to talk today, and I thought it's better to go impromptu, just kind of connect with all the students to understand in terms of where are we in our personal brand journey, right? It's so very important when you look at yourself, you look at the world around you, and just from an introduction standpoint. And thank you so much, Runa ma'am, for such a wonderful introduction. But it's very interesting. Like when I look at myself, and it's been 20 years in the industry. Come from a very small town, north of India, Shimla. Completed my BBA and MBA, and then kind of moved into a organization Converges. And I want to kind of quickly share a story with you, that as I was kind of getting into jobs in 2000 2001, we didn't had a lot of opportunities, right, for people who had completed bachelors and masters, to kind of really go ahead and look at office based jobs. So you still had a lot of sales, credit card sales, and some of the other stuff, but not much of office based jobs. So as I kind of started to look at some of the companies, there was this new company which had come in India. His name was Converges, and I kind of joined them. And 6 months I got promoted, all was going well, and the account went back. And while the associates kind of moved into a different account, and we had the managers, supervisors moving in, we were a couple of people who were like floor support, who were just in midst of kind of getting into a supervisor level, were just left high and dry. And good thing was that as an organization, they figured out okay, we have to do something. So you can think about a bachelor's and a master's in business administration was at some point of time fixing computers, looking at how do you kind of really see the networks around you, and so on and so forth. At that point of time, you had pagers. So if the network would go down, there would be a beep on the pager. You have to move to the control room, ensure that everything's up and running, and so on and so forth. And interestingly, as I kind of started to kind of work in very different departments, so I kind of was in technology, and then I kind of quickly moved into a workforce management area. And then I started to do a bit of as I call it, the flow charts. The WFM head and the HR had spotted me, saying that oh my god, this guy, we're just growing the organization, and he's thinking ahead. He's kind of creating flow charts, because we were coming up with another site in Pune and Bangalore, and they said that it's going to be very very useful. So I started to kind of work on those, and cutting the story short, I landed myself in talent acquisition in Converges. At some point of time, we were doing around 5,000 to 7,000 hires a year, and I kind of traveled across India. To an extent, we went outside of India also to look at where we can set up our offices, and so on and so forth. Now, if you look at all of this, right, at some point of time during our careers, as we work, as students as well, we create a brand for ourselves. We create an identity for ourselves. And that identity is nothing but when somebody talks about Kshitij, what does he think about him? Not what he says about himself, but what other people are thinking, right? It can be perception, but at the same time, that's what you're telling people, who you are, right? So I have always believed in, really one of the guys, Ram Charan. I don't know if you've heard about him or not, but Dr. Ram Charan is a very strong business strategist. He kind of, really works with the CEOs and so on and so forth. And he's spoken about a couple of things, right? One, he says that, for you to understand your customers, and customers can be anyone, right? It can be your employees, it can be your board, it can be your stakeholders, it can be your leadership, it can be your employees to consumers, anybody, what you need to do is you need to go a further beyond. You need to understand your customers well. So when I'm in human capital, as I support my business leaders, I need to understand their business models. Otherwise, I won't be able to support them. I'll not be able to do the right set of stakeholder alignment, because what's keeping my stakeholders awake at night is very, very important for me to understand. And they're not bothered about how do I support them or what I want to give them. It's about what's their need. Is my offering meeting their need? And sometimes those are unmet needs that I need to really look at, right? So that's one which is very, very important. The second piece that I want to leave you with is that there are three layers of influence, right? As you're looking at your careers, you're looking at in terms of, what does brand mean? What does stakeholder, communication means? Very clearly, if you were to look at, right, there's one, your area of influence, right? So as students, as you're creating your brand, and you're looking at kind of, getting into corporates, you have an area of control, which is completely in your control. So that means your studies, your ability to connect with people, your ability to hone your communication skills, your ability to kind of, really go deep into the subjects and the areas that you want to work in. Then second piece is area of influence, right? So you can influence your university, you can influence your deans, you can influence your, in the state that you're working in terms of, which are the organizations that I want to go and so on and so forth. And then the last piece is area of communication. You don't have any control there, but you can still go ahead and communicate, right? So when I look at social media, and most of our students, we are very, very, happy writing, talking on social media. That is a no control zone. That's a bit of an influence zone, but more of a communication zone, right? So be very, very clear in terms of, how you want to be seen on social media and how do you create your brand, because anything and everything that you're doing, you're leaving a trail behind. And as you leave that trail behind, you need to ensure that you're leaving a good trail behind rather than kind of, doing something and thinking that, nobody's going to see, right? And so that's something which is very, very important. The last piece that I wanted to kind of, really talk about in terms of, during this pandemic, if you were to look at, there are three big social institutions who've kind of, come together under one roof. It's your work, it's the family, and it's the students, their schools. All of that has come under one roof. So if we think that it's only that, people like us who are working from home need to change or adapt, I guess it's for everyone. It's for everyone in the family. As a society, I guess the amount of change that we've seen in the last 6 months is unprecedented. We haven't seen this kind of change, and for good or bad, we should not be seeing this going forward as well. But just a few learnings, right, from this. I guess as we were looking at and we were hit with something like this pandemic, most of the organizations didn't know how to react, including us. At that point of time, I was heading India, and we had around 25,000 people in India working with us. And we didn't have an idea in terms of, what lies ahead of us. And that's where I guess we got to see some of the people who just rose to the occasion. And I call them, again, integrators, right? You've got subject matter experts, and you've got these integrators. When there's a fire, they don't care whether they are the firemen, they're sitting in the office, or what they're doing. But these are the first ones who go out and really look at how do we douse the fire. And we had such heroes. Now, they were not wearing capes, right? But they were heroes in true sense as they came forward and they kind of, really looked at how do we solve. And that's where I want to leave each one of you to think about as you're creating your brand, you're looking at, this was a big opportunity for us. as society, as community, to come forward and help each other. And it's selfless, but at the same time, when you do such things, you typically endorse something which is humanity. And humanity, by the way, is very less of a brand available in the market today, right? So being human, right, while I'm not promoting one of the actors kind of, big brand, but what I'm trying to say is that these are the times when we are required to just lend a ear to someone else. You don't know what people are going through. I was on a panel with CHROs in China, and they're ahead of us like 6 or 8 weeks. And, we were checking with them in terms of, what are the few things that we should do, that we should learn from you in terms of, as you've gone ahead and you've been ahead of the curve. They said that, while we were in this and we were coming back, one thing that we mistook was really the mental health of our people, of our country. Physically, people were back, but mentally they were stuck. So how do you create that help for them is very, very important. And when you look at employer branding, when you look at employers, it's very, very important for you to touch on these very softer, areas to kind of, ensure that, people understand and they kind of, come together. So that's from my side, Runa.
How mesmerizing. I think the range you covered is so fantastic. Learning from you about how to understand the customer, how to look at the business perspective, that when you are interfacing with customer, what is the business model they offer, preparing our students from that segment. Also, touching about how to create their own, persona through their, certain behavioral standpoint, that they need to be curious, they need to utilize social media where there is no control, but can they actually use that platform to their benefit? And in fact, none other than me, I would quote unquote, I love social media. And I'm so lucky today. I saw that I have been, shortlisted as one of the influencers for ETHR World. I'm so happy about that. Because sometimes the surprises give you that, reinforcement that if social media you are using for the right kind of a track, it surely can create value. And in fact, that's what we had been practicing. And Kshitij, you talked about networking, and also Arup talked about a lot of elements around branding and how do you really brand well. And he gave example of Onida, because that was the first negative advertisement. Don't just envy the when Onida TV buy it. I think a lot of angles you both have put. And Kshitij, I love the way you talked about how to integrate the whole thing. I think that's the beauty. I was speaking to some business guy recently, and he was talking his marketing initiative by saying, hey, we are doing our ATLs, all right, but actually we would like to look into how social media advertisement are taken care. So digital, or if you say from ATL, BTL to DTL, if we are actually getting there, so are we giving the right direction to our students for the detail? I think thank you both speakers for bringing that perspective, and I'm really now eager to listen to Vikas, who actually combines both the world, combines the value which created Arup created through the business standpoint, and Kshitij, you actually gave a lot of multiple perspective, not only from people, individual, leadership, and also various segments. I think Vikas, I would be very, very curious when you bring your journey from talent acquisition to entrepreneurship to startup leadership, many such, wise, activities you have done. So please, Vikas, enlighten us with your wisdom and experience.
Thank you so much, Rona ma'am, for that very gracious introduction. And thanks to Parul University for putting this platform together. I'm really excited to be here. In fact, when I was thinking about it, and when you reached out, immediately there were 3 bells which rang in my mind, and I'm happy to share those. But before I do that, just for the benefit of the audience, a little bit about myself. I have about 18 years of work experience across hospitality, education, and ITS. And I consider myself an HR/TA practitioner. Majority of that has been in the hiring space. And most recently, I have started my startup, as Roonam said. It's in the area of facilitating education in the academic space through a tech platform. It's called Attain. And apart from that, I am also the advisor to the steering committee at the BRICS Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where again, one is working with students and young professionals to help them grow. In my free time, I like to blog, and I like to blog under my HR in my heart framework. And that's the personal brand piece that Kshitij was talking about. So I've already taken some of his advice. So having said that, the topic really was the first reason which pulled me in the moment you reached out. Brand equity, raising the bar. It's very differentiated from what other panel discussions have been taking up in the last few months. There have been a number of them. The second, of course, is this brilliant panel, again, chaired by you, which is something that I've looked forward to making these connections. The third I'll come to in a bit. It's a little story that I'll probably share before that. And to kind of bring the story into place, I just want to reiterate for the sake of the audience that brand equity is really when you're able to get your customers to sway in your direction over the competitor. Net, if in very simplistic terms, that's what it is. Where a customer may be able to pay you a little extra for just your brand value or the perception of your brand. On a lighter note, and please don't take me wrong, for any man, I think brand equity is high if the wife says good job. So that's what I would say. But coming back to the theme, if you look around in our ecosystem itself, and it's a classic example, Apple, a brand that many of us cherish. I'm a huge Apple fan myself. Not many people know this, but if you look at the market share of Apple in any typical market that it operates in terms of unit sales, it's about 10 to 20% of the market in that category of smartphone sales that it manages to achieve, 10 to 20%. But if you look at profits in the whole smartphone category space, it takes in about 80 to 90%. So literally the other players are just making peanuts while Apple is cashing it out with $1,000 iPhones. Every year it relaunches and it refreshes, and it's got that solid brand equity, which is built on human technology. Closer home, Tata Group comes to mind whenever you talk of great brand equity. Very, very strong on values, very, very trustworthy. It'll do no wrong to its vendors. It'll do no wrong to its employees. It'll do no wrong to its customers. So that's what I think every brand somewhere aspires to do. Here I'll come into why I actually like this topic very much, because like Kshitij, I happen to somewhere gray my hair in the ITS or the BPO space. And I'm sure you'll agree with me on multiple counts. But some of the data points I want to share before I actually go there is that the IT BPO industry per se is about $200 billion projected this year, almost 191, 200. Out of that, the BPO space is about 1/4, 25%. And this grows 7.7% annually. It's expected to go to $350 billion. The entire BPO segment itself, just by itself, as per NASSCOM, employs about 11 lakh people. And again, it adds about 2 lakh every year on top of this number. But having said that, this is the biggest industry that no one wants to join. It is a classic situation of brand equity not being very strong. And that's the reason I kind of gravitated towards this topic, because I spent a number of my years in TA trying to address this very specific problem. So I'm taken back to my early days of my career in 2006, when I really started in the ITS space. And I was driving the campus recruitment program at one of the largest players. What we really were trying to do to build brand equity was actually educate everyone. The trust would come later. It actually started with getting down into the to the grassroots level, going into the tier 2, tier 3 towns, being at campuses like Parul University, talking to students, explaining to vice chancellors, to directors, to training placement officers, to try to tell them and expose the entire scale of the BPO industry and what it was doing to transform India. After liberalization, IT did get a very positive recognition and is often seen as the industry which really flourished. But along with that, there is this sibling, or in some cases, what consider the step brother or step sister, the BPO industry, which also flowered, gave careers to many of us, me including. So it's something that I think I'm very proud about personally, of having contributed to that exercise, where parents in tier 2, tier 3 towns were comfortable enough to send their young girls or boys to the big city of Bombay or a Bangalore or a Chennai for the first time ever. So that's how brand equity is really built, by really going down to the grassroots, to understanding what is your core offering and actually putting it out there. What are the challenges we faced? Very clearly, big time challenge, night shifts. This was the first challenge or first problem, or first time that India saw night shift in at such a scale. Before that, there were obviously airlines, there were hotels which are operating some minimal night shifts, maybe 5-10% of the staff. But this was the first time we actually had entire buildings of 500,000 people operating in the night hours, because we were obviously servicing the US and the Europe markets. We had cases where the cabs which would ferry these people would have accidents because drivers were driving at crazy speeds in the middle of the night. We had unfortunately, some very unsavory incidents involving women colleagues of ours. So it was a huge challenge, no doubt. But the point was that in spite of all this, there were a lot of positives, a lot of inherent pluses in the BPO industry which were not getting visible, which the media was not possibly picking up. And we used all steps within our control to project those. And I think to some extent we succeeded. I think today there's much more greater awareness. At least the youth today does not have a negative perception. It may not be number one choice even today, for that matter, at a B school or an MBA school or an engineering school. But yes, I think there's greater acceptability. And I think that as we move forward into the post-COVID world, where there is heightened level of understanding about job opportunities, about which industries are growing, I think the youth will be possibly more open to taking up such opportunities in this sector. So that's my personal hope. Personally, I think, and you brought it out initially, it's given me a lot as well. The number of campus presentations I did gave me that confidence to become a TEDx speaker one day and be on a stage. I still had the butterflies in the stomach, but I think thank you. A lot of the hard work that went, going from one town to the other, contributed a lot in that. So I think what I would advise you to do is to be open and to make sure that opportunities as they come up, they grab them, understanding the intrinsic value of the brand, not just looking at the show. Most often we get caught up in the show thanks to, again, social media. So dig deeper, try and understand the real benefits and move on from there is what I'll say.
Wonderful, Vikas. I think you actually made Kshitij and me also feel nostalgic because we have combated that era when students won't join outsourcing industry.
Correct.
And I remember prior to that, I was with BFSI. I mentioned Escorts. I did not mention that I was actually, I grew as head of HR and Escort Finance. And we had tremendous amount of issue getting people in NBFC. And today, everyone wants to join there. But when you actually become part of the innovative world, you are the one who are the forerunners who are creating value as first time, in the sprint. बाद में तो सब आते हैं, पहले कौन क्रिएट करता है. तो उस सेंस में अगर हम देखें तो it's very much fine to work in an established environment, but creating something is very important. I think today's youth needs to be those creators, because pandemic era has put that innovator inside us, that अगर आपने खुद कुछ नहीं किया, कोई आपको प्लेट में नहीं देगा. So वो प्लेट आपको खुद का खुद क्रिएट करना है. I'm sure domestically they are already realizing that घर में सब काम खुद करना पड़ रहा है, तो बाहर क्यों नहीं. So I think that was a brilliant point when you talked about how outsourcing era changed our country, and we are the leader there. At the same time, I actually find that wherever we have seen students get a number of positions, whether it's sales or operation or an industry which demands people, students have adversity. नहीं वहाँ नहीं जाना. We have faced that. जहाँ job है वहाँ नहीं जाना, कहीं और जाना है. तो क्या, do we have those skills? Do we have the acumen? I think before I hand it over to Ananya sir for some audience question, would like to request if considering that we have only 10 minutes and we have loads of questions, we might would like to take 4 or 5 of them minimum. If you all speakers would like to take just one-liner, just to encourage students and show the reality, because you talked about the new industry, and new industry is edutech industry. Besides healthcare and e-commerce, etc., how many of the students want to be part of that edutech industry? Question mark. So similarly, you might have some anecdotal point, 1 or 2 liner for students, and then with that, I would like to hand over to you, then Ananya sir.
Sure. I can go first. I can just kind of tell you that as Runa ma'am, you're talking about edutech industry, the digital health is kind of really taking on unprecedented I would say funds in the digital world. So 2020, think about it, more than 20 billion has been already invested in digital tech. That's a big number. Now, if you were to compare it with BFSI, which is fairly matured industry, and healthcare from that perspective is a little naive, there's a big opportunity for students to look at in terms of how healthcare of tomorrow or future will change. And I guess some of the mindset shifts which have happened during the pandemic has been unprecedented again, right? Telehealth, a lot of digital health mediums which have been used, mental health models, which have been used through technology. There have been some companies who've been doing a far better job than traditionally the way we were doing before. So as I just want to leave everyone with saying that I'm not promoting healthcare as an industry, but what I'm saying is that ensure that you keep a very close watch on tomorrow. The market is not about today, right? As you graduate, you need to look at 10 years hence, which sectors, which industries will flourish and will grow, right? And that's what Vikas, you said, and Runa ma'am, you were saying that 2099, when people joined the ITS industry, I'm sure all of them today are fairly well placed in their careers compared to somebody who's joined 2010, 11.
So I can share my thought at this point. We're almost coming to the close. So what I would really guide the students listening is that it's no secret the industry, corporate landscape is changing. But I also see that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you are about 25,000 plus students in Parul University. If all of you get together and focus towards placements, towards your careers, and take charge of them together as one unit, just look at the power you can generate. So be one unit and work together towards your final goals.
Aru, would you like to give one-liner before Ananya sir closes the session?
No, I think I agree with both Vikas and Kshitij. I do believe that with the current situation that we are in, healthcare is going to be an important sector, because not undertaking a step towards that has a mammoth impact on the overall economy. And while he mentioned that how much has been invested, which is of a very high amount, and any amount you invest there is going to be less than the impact of not investing. So, and that is a good reason enough for the future generation to think on those lines and move towards in a global space, because it's all about sustainability. While billions are being spent on making the environment sustainable in terms of the global warming and deforestation and rest of the things. So, and this not for no reason that people like Bill Gates and all the bigwigs are investing in these sectors like healthcare and the sustainable businesses. Even Honeywell, I mean, we used to see that more and more focus is shifting towards how the business can be made more sustainable with digitization, of course, being the flavor of the day. Everybody is moving towards that. But at the end of the day, if people are not there, we are not surviving, then what's the business all about? So we have to make sure that our future generations, they survive and survive well and thrive, so that the business can then thereafter follow. So that has to be of paramount importance. Thank you.
Right. Then I take this opportunity to take over, madam. We are just 5 minutes away from the close, and the students are super excited to listen to the views, starting from yourself, where you mentioned about the employer and employee value proposition and etiquette hygiene of the digital space, where Arup sir spoke about how to create value for the consumers, where they are willing with the 4 stages, when Kshitij sir spoke about the 3 layers, and Vikas sir spoke about the changes in the BPO sector. And so quickly, I will just, there are so many questions, and let's see if we can take a couple of them. The very first questions, as this generation is more into entrepreneurial skills, goes to Vikas Dua sir. And his question is, sir, what is your advice to the startups who actually don't have to worry about the brand equity, as they may have a limited audience, and also they may be geographically limited, and especially in COVID crisis, the startup is going down. So what is your advice to them, and does actually brand equity apply to them?
Great question. In my understanding of late, in fact, while the startup funding may have reduced in the last 4 to 5 months, and obviously there is you can say a conscious and a cautious look that VCs and other parties are following right now. Per se, the startup creation has actually increased by all data points, including numbers that the Department of Company Affairs and all share periodically. So wherever there is innovation, wherever there are ideas that anyone wants to put together, I don't think the COVID has stopped them from putting them up and starting on that journey. Yeah, the track may take a little bit of a time, but I think that's a realization everyone has. As far as the brand equity side of it goes, I again tend to believe, and that has always been the case in startups, at least in the initial phase, where it's usually close connected individuals, either professional or students from a particular batch, that come together and create something. And it's only at stage C or Series C situation where they try and onboard external talent and build up that organization. So brand equity comes into play a little later down in a startup's life. And by that time, if they have a rock solid business model and a unique offering, then it really plays to their advantage.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. I think, madam, today also we are running out of the time, and the series of questions we are coming in. Unfortunately, students, we are already towards the end. To the audience, some professionals also been asking. So there are questions for Arup sir and Kshitij sir, Vikas sir, for you as well. What we'll do is we'll forward you the questions. If you can just answer it to us, we will send it to our audiences, because we have their email IDs here, and I hope we'll be able to answer them. As we are running out of the time, I will just like to conclude this session. It has been a fantastic session for all of us to listen to the views that you all have shared, and how the industry is shaping up, what would be the chances, what changes have been implemented. And it is really create a great time to listen to all of you. On behalf of Faculty of Arts, Parul University, its management, the students, and the audience, I would like to thank all of you, the speakers, for taking up your time. I also take this opportunity to thank my viewers, the students, the technical cell, the event cell, and my colleagues for being a part of this. And a very special thank to Runa madam for making this event successful. Thank you so much, and we would love to have you at the campus once the pandemic is over. Thank you, and see you all soon. and we hope that we will interact soon once again. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you
with us.
so
Thank you.
much, everyone. Thank you
Pleasure.
so much, Runa ma'am, for being there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for the invite to the university. We'll wait for the
Thank you so
pandemic to
much.
be over and be there.
Yes,
Surely,
yes,
surely. We are
yes,
looking
yes.
forward to have you here. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.